Hi, everybody. This week's guest is Reid Miller, and one of the big takeaways in this episode for me was how fearless and shameless she is in pursuing her goal as a first-time entrepreneur of creating a custom women's apparel line for active women. So she just has dove right in, and in this episode she describes, a crazy failure of a Kickstarter project that she started and her thought process of being naive as an entrepreneur. And I really appreciate her being so open and honest. And you know what? It's not even like she has any kind of filter on this, because she's just looking at this whole thing as a great learning experience, which I think is the right way to approach any endeavor like this, because you're never going to be ready to start a new business. You're never going to know enough to start a new business. You just have to start. And Reid really shows us the way in this regard. So excited to bring you this episode. Also, I'd like to thank everybody who has liked the Facebook pages last week and is signing up on the email list. So we went over 50 likes, which is awesome. So I like to keep everything building there. So if you know someone who's interested, who would be interested in the content in the show and needs to maybe jumpstart or jolt to kind of get moving, one of the best ways is just to start listening and hearing other people's experience. So please share it with them. Also, if you're interested, I've seen a couple people have left a couple of 5-star reviews, which is awesome. I really thank you, and I know that means that people are getting something out of the show. So if you're so inclined, please do that in iTunes or on the Facebook page or in the any other podcasting app that you're using, because that really helps visibility of the show and drive up the search results. So it just takes a second, and if you're really getting some value out of it, that would really help people discover the show more easily. Oh, and before I forget, Reid has created a new funding project for her business, and it's on ifundwomen.com, and it kicks off September 26th. So listen to the end of the episode for details on that, and if you're interested in supporting her, you'll be able to find all the information you need in the show notes. So now, on to the show.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hi, everybody. Hey, this is Jim, and welcome to episode 10 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution. And I'm talking today with Reid Miller of Reid Miller Apparel, and we're going to talk about how she's reimagining women's apparel, custom women's apparel, and hopefully we can talk about body scanning a little bit, because I think that part of it could be fascinating. And also, I want to hear about what's going on with the bike commuting scene in Durham, North Carolina. So, Reid, welcome to the revolution.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, and I'm glad that we finally had a chance to hook up. And thanks for being my guinea pig here in terms of this is my first phone interview or Skype conversation.
Yeah, really?
So, and we got the technology pulled together. Thanks a lot for finding a microphone and working with me on that. So the sound will be great.
No problem.
So tell me what's going on. What's been happening?
Oh, what's been happening? Well, we're at a really interesting point with the company. So I have spent the last year, about a year from now, I had an epiphany that we probably had all the technology we needed to do made-to-measure women's wear much more efficiently. So I started looking into it about a year ago. And it was actually, it's funny, my dad, he said to me, because I got a jacket sample back and it was just a little bit too big. And all of a sudden it didn't look that great. So I designed this great blazer, beautifully tailored, wonderful for activity and great in the office and all that. And I got the sample back and it's just a little too big. And all of a sudden it looks like my grandpa's blazer.
Oh, no.
And so I said, shoot, this really has to fit what am I going to do? And I'm sure other entrepreneurs get this feeling that you have when you're like, oh, something's not working.
Well,
what do I
exactly.
do?
So what did you do?
Yeah. So my dad is sitting with me over coffee and he's like, well, my dentist takes this little wand and he scans your tooth and then he makes a molar to measure.
Oh.
I wonder if you can do that with jackets, with clothing.
Right. So did you take your jacket to your dentist?
I did not take.
Okay.
Oh God, I hate the dentist.
Maybe that's
no,
not quite the right approach.
What I thought.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, instead I took my laptop and I'm like, what is the technology out there to make made-to-measure clothing? And all of a sudden I'm looking and I realize, wow, there are tons of menswear companies that are doing made-to-measure clothing, and we have things like body scanning, where a person steps into something that looks like a dressing room and a bunch of sensors takes their measurements and you get all these measurements. It's amazing. And there's all kinds of neat things that are happening with that. That'll eventually be on people's cell phones. They can take their measurements in their living room. Right. So that was one really neat one.
So that's happening.
And actually,
hold on a second. So that's happening today with men's clothing. Because I haven't know that I've experienced it. I haven't been looking for it, but
there's a really interesting company called Alton Lane, and they have a bunch of shops around the country. We're in a smaller city here. We don't have an Alton Lane, but when you get up to New York or DC or even Richmond, you can go and check out an Alton Lane, and they use these body scanners, and you walk in and they offer you a scotch.
Oh,
and
maybe I should be checking these
leather
guys out.
Couches. Absolutely. Right. It sounds like quite the experience. And then you step in the body scanner and they make beautiful clothing for you to measure. And it's professional looking stuff, suits and
I see.
And
is the scanner, is it kind of like the scanners at the airport, like the body scanners at the airport? Something like that?
It's not quite as intimidating.
You don't have to raise your hands and spread your legs and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Those are a little bit intense. So I think the feel that they create is that of a dressing room. So it's not any more different than that. But something to note is that they're getting smaller and they're getting cheaper, like everything else with technology. Right. And so it's going to get very interesting in terms of where you're able to put them and what you're able to do with them.
Interesting. So you had this jacket, you had this experience of it's not fitting well, so you decided, like, let me research this thing. Can we rewind just a second? Like, were you always designing clothes? This was something that you were designing on your own at this time, right?
So this is my reinvention of Reid Miller.
Right.
So I was actually, when I was a little girl, I was like, I am going to be a fashion designer.
Oh, as a little girl, you were thinking about
it. As a little girl, I was drawing all these designs, and my grandma would help me make things for me and for my dolls. And I'm like, I'm going to be a fashion designer. And my parents are lawyers and they're very practical people. And they said,
So they were probably like thinking like, oh, this is what all girls think about when they're little. Right.
They do. And then they're like, this is not a career. You're a smart young woman. What else can you do that might actually make money, might actually support you? And so I put that aside, and I was really good with law and health and policy. And so public health is where I ended up. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa.
Wow.
I loved
really?
that.
How long were you over there?
I was there for 2 years in this tiny little village in the middle of nowhere.
In West Africa, like Nigeria or something like that?
In Togo. So Togo's tiny little country right in between Ghana and Benin on the water there. And super, super poor. And so there's no electricity or running water, and everybody's kind of it's a sad situation. But the village the people were amazing, and I was working on health work. And what was really neat about it is you get kind of placed in this place, and you get to think and talk to people and figure out, well, what do I need to do here? You have total autonomy.
Interesting.
Which is neat. It's kind of gave me the first taste of entrepreneurship. Right. So like I can do anything here to solve a problem. What is it going to be? And so I was in the middle of all these villages, 13 rural villages. And I realized, well, women are the ones that are kind of the heart of the family.
Right.
They're cooking for the family. They're caring for the children. They're responsible for way too many things, in my opinion. But they have, they're doing all these things. Well, what if we could make sure that they had the health information they need to make sure that their family is as healthy as they can be under the circumstances?
Right, okay.
And so I trained rural health workers. I held these big trainings where I brought all these women together, and the villages nominated a woman to come and learn about malaria prevention and nutrition and sexual and reproductive health. And it was phenomenal because some of these women only had been in school for a few years.
Right.
They're literally taking notes, drawing in their notebooks that I provided them. And asking questions that they'd never been able to ask. And I had a bit of education in medical sciences for enough time that I could answer all these basic sexual and reproductive health questions and nutrition and all of that. And so it was amazing.
Yeah, it sounds phenomenal.
Really
that
impactful.
You really could have an impact over there. It sounds like.
Right. Very, very neat. But then, I come to North Carolina, I get a degree in public health, and I start biking.
Okay. So, all right. So you come back from Africa. Why did you come back to North Carolina? Because I think you told me you're originally from San Francisco or West Coast?
Yeah, so I am originally just north of San Francisco. So North Carolina has one of the best public health schools in the country.
Okay.
And so I came here to be in a program focusing on maternal and child health. And so I moved out from the Peace Corps out to North Carolina. And then I got my first bike for bike commuting, and I didn't have a car. And so I started that program, and I'm biking everywhere. And it's interesting because,
so had you been biking previously? Were you into biking or kind of an athlete earlier?
So my dad and I used to mountain bike, and I liked bikes and I loved mountain biking, but I didn't have the passion for it that I started to have when I was bike commuting, because I think the advocate in me was like, why isn't this easier? This is so smart.
Interesting. Okay.
It's so environmentally friendly. It's so healthy.
Right. It is. It really is.
Why isn't this better? Why isn't this better? And especially for women, because they're really neglected by the bike industry, and it's getting better, but a lot of the bike industry is kind of thinks, oh, well, if we just make a small pink version of this, we've really nailed our market. And it's
not too creative or imaginative,
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm in this program and I'm biking everywhere. And as I'm biking, the designer in me kind of comes out again. And it's like, okay, first of all, why does my clothing suck for biking? Like, why do all the things I have in my wardrobe not work for me to do this short little ride, maybe a 20-minute ride to campus, to my presentations, to my meetings?
So let me ask you a question here, because I think this is important for people to understand. It's important for me to understand, just because I'm not a bike commuter, but I know that the biking scene is really growing over the last 10 years. It's like an explosion in like most cities now, where it's like there's all these meetup rides and all these things going on, a lot more commuting happening. But what are you wearing? Like, what's your thought process in terms of, I have to go to work every day and be professional, right? But I also want to commute, because the guy that lives literally next door to me, he's a bike commuter, and he commutes down to the Cleveland Clinic area every day, and he works in an office. He's a lab researcher. So you have to be professional, but how do you handle biking in the summer when it's hot and you're getting sweaty and you need the right things to wear? Do you always change clothes when you get to work?
No. So that was the thing, is I didn't want to carry, you're already carrying your lunch and your work stuff and all this. I mean, maybe you're working out after, you're already carrying a lot of stuff. So I didn't want to carry anything else. And so basically I went through my closet and just try different things, and you'd realize, okay, this skirt doesn't work. It's like blowing up, and I'm riding,
Right.
and it's ridiculous, and it's embarrassing and horrible. And then you have this shirt. Well, why is this shirt getting all sweaty? This doesn't make sense. And my shoulders are too restricted in this jacket. Well, so I stopped wearing that jacket, and so you quickly come to realize, and then another big one is if you're wearing like pants that they're not dipping down, so your whole underwear is hanging out the back
Right,
side
right.
of you.
Which I've seen that before.
So you
I've noticed that.
Oh, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have.
It's funny.
So basically you start one by one eliminating all the things that you can't wear, and then all of a sudden you're like, I have 2 outfits
Right.
that I can
Right.
wear, and then God forbid like the pants get torn, and then you can't even, and meanwhile women's clothing is getting worse and worse. The quality is getting worse. The materials are worse. The construction is worse. The fit is getting worse because there's next to all this, there's a sad thing happening in the apparel industry, which is that it's moving to places where people are getting the lowest possible wages. The environmental standards are really
Right.
bad.
They're trying to wring the cost out of all the garments, but
and they're trying to and they're doing things like they're removing pockets and they're removing pleating and they're making clothing less fitted because that all brings the price
Right.
down. And so sometimes you can't even go and replace those pants that you bought that were really wonderful.
they don't make them
because
anymore.
Apparel is
Right.
changing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's what was happening.
I see. So that's interesting to hear about for me because I'm not a commuter, but I could see the real issue of there's just no real go-tos out there to, like, if I'm doing this and I'm in this scene, and you live in a more southern part of the U.S. where the weather is more amenable to biking more often, for longer parts of the year.
Sometimes it's incredibly
Well,
humid,
right,
so you get to really test out the breathability of your clothing.
Well, there you go.
I'll
Right,
tell you that.
that's a good market test down there, I guess.
Yeah,
but it's
absolutely.
popular and people are doing it. So you're like, where's the go-to? There's all this athletic clothing that you could wear, right? That would be better, but you still don't feel quite right when you get to the office in terms of just wearing that all day. Right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's your insight. So how did this maybe fired you up again to decide, maybe there's something I could do about it?
Well, so that's like what 2010
Okay.
or so, and I'm in grad school and I'm biking around. But of course, at the time, I'm not thinking I'm a designer, I'm an entrepreneur. Right. I'm just thinking about this problem and struggling in my
Right.
career, it wasn't so much a struggle. It's just, I guess in hindsight, when you get to a place that's more fitting, you realize how much struggling was actually going on.
Say that again. That's very
fit.
interesting, because when people are trying to recreate or reinvent or reimagine what their life can be, which we have all these possibilities and opportunities, which I want to hear about how you actually decided to be an entrepreneur and start this company.
Yeah.
This is an important thing to realize. Like you need to kind of keep sampling different things as you go along in life, because you might not understand what a rut you're in. Right.
Yeah, totally. And that we have this idea. I mean, there's certain things with struggle that you realize in entrepreneurship, there's so much struggle, and it pushes you to realize things and change things in a really positive way. But that's a completely different thing from struggling in a career where it's like wearing the wrong size shoes,
right.
And they're too small, and you're like, this doesn't fit. This doesn't fit. And I don't even realize it, because I just thought,
that's just the way it is.
It's always a struggle. Everything's struggle.
Just got to work hard.
And I didn't realize that, like, collaborating with giant institutions that move at these really slow paces, and you have all these people that you need to get signing off on things and all of this. I was actually an entrepreneur, and I really wanted to wake up every day and just go to town on something and problem solve. And I could be the one bringing people together to do that. And I just didn't even realize that. So that designing was just occurring fun on the bike, nothing serious about it. And it wasn't until I had a few kind of like wake up calls where I'm like, okay, this career is really not working in public health. This is not working for me. And when I was going through all that, friends were like, well, you're the type of person that starts their own thing.
Oh, so they were reflecting this back to you. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, you can't do that in public health. You can't start your own thing. Like, they're big institutions.
Yeah, kind of by definition, it's public health, so it's about the institutions, right?
It's about the institutions. So then finally, I'm like, okay, maybe it's just not public health. Maybe that's just not for me. And so I started thinking about this problem that I had with my clothing while I was bike commuting. And so I'm like, had all these different ideas of, if I want to be an entrepreneur, how do I solve this problem? And finally, I met this designer. He was a apparel designer for Donna Karan and some big fashion houses up in New York. And he says to me, you don't have to go to school for this. Just start designing your own thing. And I'll connect you with my production manager that I worked with, who will teach you how to build these products and work with manufacturing. And that was the moment. I'm in the car on the way back from this coffee with this guy, where I'm like terrified and excited, and you have that feeling that you're like, I've got to do this.
Interesting, right?
I've got to do this thing. I know it's opening up a giant can of worms and it's going to be really difficult, but I have to, because I'm so excited. And this is tapping into like a passion that I've had for a long time.
Right. So just becoming more self-aware and tuned into what you're feeling, like, wow, this might be the right direction. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's great when you discover that. Wow. So, but there's some actual, logistics that have to happen. So you're still working full time at this point, right?
Well, so at that point, I decided when that meeting took place, I was still working full time. I got a few months in to working on my idea for an apparel company. Initially, it was for bike commuting, for wardrobe staples for women that commute by bike. And I got a few months in and realized that I was so drained by the job I was in that I really needed to just do something that energized me. And so I left my job in public health. I had a pocket of money from a relative who had passed. And I said, okay, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to go to town. I'm going to try and build this thing as fast as possible, which is something that somebody who has never started a business maybe says.
Right. You're like, I know I can do this.
Because I know in 6 months, I mean, I really said, like, in 6 months or a year, I'm going to be launching this thing.
Oh, this was what you had in your mind, that this was a possibility. Which I love this. I think it's fascinating. And really, I think this is how a lot of entrepreneurs start. What is good about them is they don't know what they don't know, and so they just dive right in. And I think it's actually better that way, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh,
right.
Man.
That's a lot of work.
I later heard it. Yeah, I later heard a really interesting talk where this man said that go for the really big idea and let it take 10 years. And actually, that's kind of where I am now. Let it take as much time as you need, work really hard and get there, but go for the really big idea.
Okay, right.
So anyway, so that's something I learned later.
Very good. Okay, so you had this money. I didn't know this part of your story here. So you had this little chunk of change to get you going, and so you dive in. So what happens, like, within these, I guess, first 6 months or whatever? What did you learn, or how did you think about it?
Yeah. Oh man, I learned a lot of things. Okay, so I actually was really lucky to very quickly design 3 pieces. I said, the first thing I'm going to start with is this one outfit that you can jump on your bike and you can get to work and you can look professional and you can be. And there's also this move in people's careers, which is that, like, I want to be doing something where I go to these meetings, I give this presentation, then I meet my friend for coffee, and then maybe I, like, go for a walk or whatever. And you don't want to have to change.
Right. Well, you know what?
Like, be able to be out
This
and
is a
about.
great insight into how our lives are changing. Okay, things are different these days. Everybody's co-working. People are doing bike commuting. There's a lot of solopreneur things happening because of the technologies that are available on the internet, et cetera. And so you're not going to the office and staying in your office all day long like people used to, just behind their desks. So that's a really good point to understand that. I think more people are going to be wanting these types of clothing.
Absolutely. And really, I mean, it's actually a throwback to the old school where you'd ride your horse to meet with your business associates. And actually, so that was a lot of when I started designing the first pieces I designed, I went and looked at old school sportswear where you would wear a riding jacket, a wool tweed riding jacket, which incidentally wool breathes. It's one of the best performing materials. It's natural and it's more sustainable. And so I went and got inspiration from that to be like, what were things that we used to do where we wanted to look really sharp and professional, but we needed to be a little bit active. And not, we're not like running.
Right. Well, that's a great analog to biking, actually, is riding a horse. Yeah.
Totally. Is riding a horse. And it was the designer, Mick Hogan, that turned me on to getting back into fashion design. That was one that brought that up. He's like, go look at horseback riding, go look at old school sports and hunting and all of that. And so I did. And I designed this beautiful wool tweed riding jacket. And then I started thinking, well, how do you make this just a little bit better? And I was watching an old film, Chinatown, and I saw this pleat between the shoulders. It was for menswear, but I'm like, well, why not for women? Sure. So I put the pleat between the shoulders. I add a zipper pocket in the back at the base of the back. So, I imagine we're walking through town. We want to take a video or a photo of something we see that inspires the work we're doing. We pull the cell phone out of our back pocket and we snap a photo. So I'm reimagining this old school sportswear for this modern urban woman. Right. And so I did that, and those came very quickly. I started and then working with the materials was fascinating. Harris tweed isn't generally marketed for women, but it's really the best tweed on earth.
Oh, okay.
Super, because I started to come across these biases that the best quality stuff wasn't marketed for women because apparel companies thought that women didn't care how her clothing performs. She just cares if she looks, skinny and kind of delicate even. That they're thinking women want to look delicate. Well, the modern woman maybe doesn't want to look delicate. Maybe she wants to look feminine but powerful because she has a lot of things.
Yeah, probably just legacy of just old cultural norms or whatever they are.
Old cultural, totally, absolutely. So we've gotten really entrenched in that. And as an outsider, coming from the fashion industry outside the fashion industry without a lot of experience in it, I just started asking all these questions of like, well, what materials could we use if anything was possible, and what kind of features would we put in, and how do we approach the design process? And so those prototypes came very quickly. It was really wonderful. That was the easy part. And then I put together this Kickstarter, which is just, I made every mistake in the book. Well, I was the only one doing it.
Before we get there, which I want to talk about too, because I'm just curious as to you're getting into this for the first time, in this, real world way of, hey, I'm trying to create a business. It's not just for fun. What tools are you using? Are you just, I wouldn't know how to design. I could write down, I could draw a picture on paper of what I'm thinking and find the material, but did you have to go out and learn, some kind of CAD program or some kind of technology or understand how to dimension clothes, etc.? When you say you designed it, what part did you do, and did you outsource some other parts? Or
yeah, so I bought a notebook with white paper and a pencil, and I basically just I actually, one thing I did, because I had been very out of practice with drawing, is I took a photo of my figure and I just traced it. And then I just started overlaying this jacket that I had in my mind, the riding jacket is pretty classic. So I just start kind of drawing this thing onto this figure. And then, just really basic arrows, pocket goes here. And the thing is, with the production manager, that's where the rubber meets the road. And so I worked with this amazing man, Alex Fridman, up in New York. And he basically takes that design and he puts it into a very practical looking sketch with measurements and all of that.
Okay, so that part was outsourced to this.
They're not artistic and fun. They're just like basic tech pack measurements. And so that part's really important because the manufacturers need something very specific to start prototyping.
Okay. I mean, that's just good to know because, just to demonstrate, I think it's instructive for people that are listening, like, gosh, how do you dive into something that you just really weren't doing, you weren't an expert at? You're quickly becoming an expert. But, there's different parts you can outsource. You can lean on other people's expertise, as you're developing your own expertise.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I think it's really important for your listeners who are manufacturing, wanting to get into manufacturing. It was critical. Alex had been in manufacturing for decades. And it is such an important thing to work with somebody that knows what they're doing and what the factories are looking for and what you're looking for from a good factory. Right.
So like in my experience of doing project management, advanced development, product development, the way I think of it is whenever you're developing a new product, you're also developing a new process. Product and process go together. And so, right. You can't just have an idea and then think you're going to figure out a way to build it later. You have to really understand the processes up front, and you might be actually requiring a new process to develop your new product offering. So that's a real key insight to understand that, maybe a first timer would not quite get right off the bat, but cool.
Yeah. I would like to say with that, when you're learning about the manufacturing process, and it's really just, at first it's just learning and you just absorb it like a sponge. But when you start to hit these points where you're like, wait, this doesn't make sense working with a factory that's super far away where I have to Skype with them to communicate back and forth and we have to spend all this money doing freight. Something doesn't make sense here. And I think it's okay to realize like you can recreate, you can create something new from what exists with the process. And it's okay to like, when you start having those struggles are good because it means that something is required of you, from your work in the process that may be different and novel. And maybe that's part of your what you're proposing.
Right. Yeah. Paying attention to the pain points can be very fruitful.
Yep.
Right. Where you're like, why is this such a struggle? Then you might end up inventing a new process that works better, and that can also add to your idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you found this designer person. What do you call this person? What kind of supplier is this?
The production manager.
Okay. I remember the term you used.
Manager.
Okay. So you find him. So he kind of reduced your designs to reality, essentially. And then where do you go from there?
Well, so he connects me with these great factories to start with. So I had the blazer, I had a sweater, a merino wool sweater, and a pair of classic denim jeans. And so those are all three different factories. And we just start working with the factories to prototype. And then I figure, well, I got to raise the money to produce this stuff. And I also, the neat thing about the crowdsourcing platforms is it's also a way to, advertise a bit. So I put up a Kickstarter with these prototypes, and I'm thinking, oh, this is wardrobe staples for the biking woman. And I had this incredibly ambitious plan to go around to major cities in the US and go to bike shops and do, trunk shows with my clothing. And it was, I guess the entire process was a pain point. The entire thing.
The entire process of Kickstarter? The entire process of Kickstarter? Or
the whole thing, the whole
your
campaign,
concept of the whole thing you were trying to do?
The whole thing was a pain point, which is, it's such a struggle. I'm sure the entrepreneurs who are listening can relate to when you realize
they're all chuckling like, oh,
off.
Yeah, we know.
You realize something is off and you're rolling with something and you're about to take a bunch of big hits. And so basically, I first of all, I'm realizing this is so much work and I'm one person and I just don't even have, I don't have one person. It's really, really, I think it's almost impossible to do a crowdsourcing campaign with one person. But anyway, but I'm realizing that, and I'm flying to all these cities, and my first event, I have it in San Francisco at this very cool Mojo bike cafe there, and everybody was super supportive. The
so let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a
fabulous.
question though. How the logistics about this? So you have this Kickstarter campaign. So part of the process of the campaign was going out to talk about and show people, like do in-store pop-ups to basically generate buzz to have people donate to the Kickstarter, right? Okay.
Yeah, to have them.
Because that's a different approach. I was just going to ask you, like, starting a Kickstarter from scratch and just putting it out there and thinking you're going to raise thousands of dollars when you don't have a community of people that you've already been speaking to.
Oh yeah.
That's tough.
Oh, that's another.
Like if you had 1,000 followers on some Facebook page that you had been talking about for a couple of years, that's a different situation. Right. But starting from scratch, this is a good learning curve right here.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. So that was one of the big realizations, is that I just was too new to have the network to do this. And also one thing is that, like, you think somebody's friends of friends is going to come out just because they're friends of friends. Friends of friends don't come out to something that they don't really care about. Your friends, they may come out if they're not on vacation. But anyway, so that's just, it was so much learning. And I went out and had my first event, and I start to realize, oh God, we have a misfit. And if any of your listeners have been into a bike shop and compared it to a high-end apparel shop, there are some significant differences. Apparel shops know about things like the way the lighting is and the way the merchandising is done. They care about that. Yep. And bike shops are just, they're like fun places. You buy some parts and a helmet and all this stuff, and it doesn't really matter quite so much. And there's cool bike shops nowadays that are taking in, things with lighting and natural light and all this stuff, but it's pretty few and far between. And so I'm trying to put this high-end tweed jacket, like hang it amongst a bunch of like plastic bike parts, and the lighting is not good, and it's just such a misfit. And I'm trying to tell people that are coming in, here, this is clothing for biking. And they're like, well, can you wear it when it's snowing out and you're getting this wind and I'm biking 30 miles to work? And I'm like, well, no, I mean, that's not the point. No. It's not for
That's
that.
interesting.
It's
but you were getting
like,
good feedback of like how
town.
people would perceive it, though.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And that's important.
And I realized at that point that marketing is a conversation. That's right. So you think that your product is something, and then you hear from other people, oh no, it's actually, this is what it means to me. And so at that point I hadn't found my market. So I had this wow, this is amazing right here, like a real world experience example of this. Because I think really when people are so passionate about their original idea, they have blinders on almost, really. And they're thinking like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. I know exactly. Everybody's going to love this because everybody thinks exactly like me. And it's not really the case, like, it is totally,
and it can be brutal when you find this out, but it's so important to like, I like the term focus on the customer, like understand what they're saying, understand what they're feeling. You have some ideas and insight but you really got to pay attention to the feedback. Awesome.
Totally. And you realize too that like you bring something completely unique to this world. Reid Miller bring this like perspective as a bike commuter that loved like super high quality clothing that lasts and works really well. But I was one in a million, you know, that bring that very specific experience. And it was really beneficial for the product I was creating. But it didn't mean that the people that buy it had to be Reid Miller, you know, like the bike commuter who loves this stuff. And so it was this tough Kickstarter and going to all these cities. And I did have, you know, some really successful events, but they were pretty few and far between. And so in the end, I didn't raise the money and I was all bummed out, but I keep with it. And I have these apparel pieces and I just start making meetings, and I'm making meetings with all these different people. And I worship this local company called Raleigh Denim. They have beautiful, beautiful jeans. My jeans, that's like the aspiration was to achieve the quality and the fit that the way they do. They're really great. And they're like union made in Raleigh, just a beautiful model. And so I go out and I meet with the co-founder there, Sarah Yarborough, and she loves the blazer. She loves it, which, you know, when you have an idol in business and you love their product and they're like, oh, I love what you're doing. You're like,
wow. Right.
Like, you know, gives you such a boost.
Maybe I'm on the right track.
Like, you know, maybe I'm on the right track. And so she says to me, and she's not a bike commuter, you know, she's got a bike, but she's not a bike commuter. And she says to me, this is like my favorite blazer, except for I could wear it every day. And I'm like, okay, here's this woman who's strong and beautiful and powerful, who's making this beautiful product, and has to be in a manufacturing facility every day. And she needs pockets, and she needs to be able to move her shoulders, and she wants to look stylish because she's an apparel designer, you know, she's got to look good. And like, that's it. So it's basically that it wants to be as stylish as your favorite wardrobe piece, but you can actually wear it every day.
Right. You don't feel too formal when you're wearing it or something, or too closed down.
But not even that. So yeah, for women's wear, yeah, I mean, that's part of it, but it's also like for women's wear, when it's stylish, it's restrictive. And men don't have that. It's so cool because menswear has always understood that a man is not going to wear a blazer that he can't move his shoulders in. Why would he do that? He would look so fidgety and uncomfortable when he's leading his boardroom, right? Like, that's terrible. But for women, it's just assumed that like when you're stylish, you're wearing something that's tight and restrictive.
I see. Okay.
And so there just is there are no options out there for women that wants to look stylish and have a commanding presence, maybe even. But she wants to still look feminine, and she wants to have things like pockets and feel the move. So it doesn't sound novel, but it is. I mean, it's
well, yeah, it's a great insight. So cool.
Yeah.
So what? So you're back in Durham now. So you had this little trial at Kickstarter, which didn't quite go your way. But you're finding out like, oh, I see. I'm starting to understand where really my market might lie. Right. So what are you thinking now? And this is maybe you're like a year into this process now?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Year. So that was maybe a year and change. Yeah. That was less than a year into the process. And so then I realized I got to get my market right. And I'm reading everything I possibly can about the apparel market, which for women is tanking. The shops are closing. Scene. The stuff it's horrible. And so I'm like, well, where does this fit? Where does this thing belong? Because it's like apparel's not doing well. And where do you put it? And shops are closing. And, you know, you either have in women's apparel super cheap stuff that is just completely disposable. I mean, you just buy it and it disintegrates in 3 or 4 wears. Or you have things that are astronomically expensive where the margins are just, you know, like the sewer is still not making a huge amount of money, but everybody along the way is taking a big cut. And so I thought, well, that's where I started to think about like, what would be possible? Like, what could we do differently? And then that's when I had the funny coffee with my dad, where I got the blazer sample back, and I'm trying to think, what boutiques do I put it in? Incidentally, it's a sample in a second color. First sample the fit was beautiful. So the second sample I get back and the fit's off, and I'm talking to my dad about it. And I already went through that bit where we realized they really need to be made to measure. And so I put the brakes on putting the clothing, the standard sizing clothing in just a boutique. I have the jeans manufactured. They're fitting really well. They got a bit of stretch in them, but the blazer was too high end to make sizes that didn't fit people very well. And the whole thing just didn't make sense to me. So I started like thinking about, well, how can we do this better? And that's where I got to the point where I was researching menswear made to measure and all of the technology. And it was so baffling that here it is, I'd had hundreds of meetings with women, and I'm showing them my clothing, and they're giving me their feedback and what they love and what they hate in their wardrobe and all of that. And women are saying like, I'll be honest with you, I really have like only 10% of my wardrobe that I like. Women are routinely saying that they just
that's interesting.
hate what they have.
Even though they have tons of clothes usually, right?
I feel the same way. They have tons of clothes and they hate it because the clothes are not meeting their needs. And
maybe that's why they keep buying more new clothes, because they're thinking maybe the next one will fit better. More.
They're replacing, they're out there on this hunt for it, but it doesn't exist. The better stuff is just really hard to find, or it doesn't exist. And so I start to think about that, and women say to me, fit, every woman, even women that you think, God, that woman looks like she's got a model body, she still has a fit issue. The women that we're all different shapes and sizes, and our clothing doesn't fit. And why would it? Because it's made for somebody else's body. And then it's all these different sizes that are imperfectly sized. And so we're basically fitting ourselves into clothing that was never designed for us. And so then I realized, well, we got all the technology available. Why aren't we doing this? And it's one of those funny things where you think like everybody else must know something I don't, because why would menswear make all kinds of made to measure and women's wear not? And the only answer I could come up with, and I realize it's going to be trickier because women's bodies are differently proportioned than men's bodies. But the big answer that kept coming up is that the people that were making the decisions actually thought that women didn't want to invest in single high quality wardrobe staples made to their measurements, which to me, at this point, I talked to hundreds of women and I'm like, that's just not true. Like, I know that that's not true. And, they may not have the same market that like Walmart has where everybody's able to afford it. And that's okay. But these women exist and they're really struggling.
And it could be a fact of like, the first time out, like hasn't been around that long for men either. And the first time out, well, let's try this one first. We think men are the better fit for it or whatever, maybe eventually it was coming around, but maybe you're just ahead of the thought process of some of the larger organizations,
Yeah, perhaps.
So, okay. So now you have this epiphany and you're like, oh, this is how it could fit in. And could be my competitive advantage. And the whole idea of addressing something that doesn't exist and then making it custom, that's kind of starting to give you, 2, 3, 4 reasons why people are going to come to you and look at you, and it's going to create some competitive mode around you as well, where it's like, oh, you're really the only one doing this. So right. So So how's that playing out now? Because are you able to be doing custom designs? What's your offering now?
Yeah. So it's fascinating. We looked around and we identified some fantastic partners, incidentally, who are all based in the Southeast. We lost a huge number of apparel and textile jobs to overseas production. And there's still some great people out here that are really making it happen. And so we are partnering with the groups that do digitized patterns. So women will be able to upload women's measurements in real time to adapt a pattern specifically for that woman in minutes. And then we've got a computerized cutting group out in Tennessee. So, the time that it takes to hand cut the jacket, which can be hours, now is minutes for a piece that's tailored to a woman's measurements. And all these partners, incidentally, have independently said that made to measure production for women is a fantastic way to bring jobs back to the U.S.
Sure.
So that was really exciting. And then we got a great sewing group, SoCo, out in Hendersonville, North Carolina, in the mountains just south of Asheville, who are going to be sewing the jackets, and they pay a living wage. And most of the women are moms, and they get off in time to pick their kids up from school. It's really fabulous. Cool. And so basically we got to the point where we had all these partners signed on, ready to go, and we needed to raise the money for it. So we found this really cool platform called I Fund Women, designed to close the funding gap that exists for women founders.
Oh, really? So do they have a website like ifundwomen.com or something?
ifundwomen.com.
Okay, I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, this their work is amazing, and one of the really cool things is that you can spend the money as it comes in, as the donation comes in. The platform is very flexible, which is very neat for somebody that's in manufacturing, because as the entrepreneurs know that are manufacturing things, there's so many different things that can occur in the process that are beyond your control, that can push the timelines and all of this. So we have all these partners lined up, and it's a stepwise process, and we can spend the money as it comes in on the I Fund Women campaign, and the partners are in our area. So we thought, well, why not? We're doing something totally novel with women's apparel. Why not take a video camera out to these places? We've identified 5 local women who are super inspiring, beautiful, different shapes and sizes and styles. And they're going to participate to test out made to measure blazer. That's the riding jackets, our first garment that we're working with. And as we raise each amount of money, we're going to go out and test it out. So we'll do a video showing how we take the measurements with these 5 women with this super awesome local professional tailor. We'll do brief interviews with the women so you can learn about how amazing they are,
cool. Yeah.
what they do, that they actually do a lot with their day-to-day life, and they need clothing that respects that. And then we're going to go out to South Carolina and show what it looks like to digitize a pattern, what that looks like for the riding jacket, do a little interview with those folks, and then go out to Tennessee once we raise the next little chunk, and take a video of the cutting of the first pieces for the 5 women. All the riding jackets tailored to their measurements, do a little interview with the group out there, so people can see the people behind it. And then we go out to Western North Carolina, to SoCo, and we'll show the process of it getting sewed up, and we'll do a video of the whole thing. For any of your listeners that are in North Carolina, we're going to do an event at the Durham Hotel, which is this super fabulous local hotel, so stylish and wonderful and supportive. The Durham Hotel. And we're going to do an event midway. So we hope that at that point, we'll be able to share back 2 or 3 of the steps. We have a giant projector. So we'll be showing the video of where we are with the process.
That sounds
and you'll get
incredible.
to meet women, and you'll get to try the jackets on. And we'll also have our denim there, which is really fun and really beautiful. So we're very excited, a little nervous.
Right. So how do you think this funding platform and second try, how do you feel it's going to go? Like, what are the levels of funding you're looking for? Like, just range,
Well, first of all, it's such a modest
Okay.
amount for this testing, which is really cool. It makes people feel like $20 really
Right,
matters,
right.
like so.
So something
It's
easy for the average
we're
person to
asking,
get into and participate in and
yeah,
really learn more
right.
information about, which is fun, you know?
And I also want people to see that I'm one woman who has a solution, and I've brought these great partners together, and I'm
Right,
trying it. And I want people to be inspired to try their own
right.
solutions from what we're doing. And so maybe it's somebody that doesn't even care about women's apparel, but wants to try something and wants the inspiration to see what it looks like for somebody to see a
Right.
testing through and see what happens with it. So that's a piece. But so we're asking for 15,000 with all the rewards and
Right.
everything. Of course, the more money, the better. If we're able to surpass that, we're able to do more. But 15,000 will get us through the
I see.
testing and give us the numbers to say, this is the turnaround we're able to do ordering the jackets. This is the price. They're going to be higher end items, competitive with a high end local boutique, but providing a whole lot more for your money because the materials are going to be the top of the
I
line
see.
and will last forever. We want women to be able to have a jacket that'll last, decades, if not her whole lifetime. And then we're paying a living wage in the U.S. So, and that we're able to send it direct to consumers. We're able to be competitive with what exists. So that's the theory we're testing out, and then we're going to break that 15,000 into smaller increments so that people help us get to each step, and then maybe they don't donate again, but they're like, well, I helped her get to the digitized pattern. Now I want to share with all my friends to help her get to the next step. That's the
Right,
hope anyway.
exactly. Well, it sounds really, it's an exciting project, I think.
Yeah, I should say that the launch is Tuesday, September 26th. And we're going to go for a month. We may extend it if we get delayed, but we're hoping that it will be a month-long
I
process.
see the launch up, so the website,
and
program will be up on the website around September 26th. Is that what
yeah,
you mean by launch?
20.
Okay.
Yeah, we will have the iFund Women page up, and we'll be ready to accept donations, and then start.
And this
filming that
includes
same
this
week.
process. This includes the custom scanning process, right?
Well, so this initial one will
I see.
not.
How are you going to do it?
We actually we had intended to work with NC State on that, but then we realized that it added a level of complexity that may threaten the integrity of the
I see.
testing of the other
Okay.
pieces, because it's just you want to make sure that you have the big ones is, can we get really fantastic accuracy with a digital pattern, a digitally adapted pattern, and with the cutting? And certainly the body scanning is going to be a key piece. It's going to get more and more accurate. It's already very accurate. It's just expensive, and it's a big piece of equipment at this
I
point.
gotcha. Okay.
But that will be incorporated. It's just right now it was adding a lot of complexity, and we just want people to see. We want this to be, when we're done with this, we can make jackets for
Right.
customers. And so we want to be able to do that
Gotcha.
right away and not have to wait for that.
Yeah, and that
technology to be more
technology
available.
will come along. I mean, that's easily, I see that
Yeah.
playing out, and that'll be very accessible at some point in terms of just doing an efficient body scan to get that custom data. Obviously, you can do it just like a tailor's been doing it for thousands of years, right? to do
Yeah,
custom clothing. So
absolutely.
you'll be doing that. Okay, I got it. I was just curious about the technology side always. Cool.
Sure.
All right, so say that date again, September.
September
26th.
26th, Tuesday, September
Okay,
26th.
when it will kick off, and then
Yeah.
what else? What else you got going on in terms of other milestones or things that are happening out there? We got a few minutes left, so I
Yeah.
want to make sure that we cover anything else
Sure.
you want to sneak in.
Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate it. So, so we're in the meantime. So basically, we're we're going to be getting really great data from this testing and getting some very good awareness that we're working on this problem. And we're working on a solution to it. We're also working on how do we get it to women? Ultimately, it would be really cool to have some great small little boutiques in urban areas. That's where we'd like to go. It's incredibly expensive, and that will be a few years out. So in the meantime, we're trying to figure out how do we reach women? And certainly we'll be able to send women to, Reid Miller Apparel certified local tailors in San Francisco or New York or wherever we can find some really great people. And so women will be able to go to their local tailor and get their measurements taken. But we're also thinking about, how can we maybe reach them in person without having a boutique? And one of the ideas that we're working on is a mobile boutique where we come to women with this smaller version of the body scanner and beautiful apparel pieces that they can try on to get a sense for the clothing, and they can come to a event and network with a bunch of women and step into our boutique and get a feel for it and get their measurements taken, and then we would ship the clothing to them at their homes. So, and we can, what's really neat is that we can take these boutiques. I don't know if you've heard about them. They're increasingly popular. You can really create a high-end experience on a little truck.
Oh, sure.
Of course, it's kind of wild, but it's really neat, and you can drive around.
Right, it's just like the food truck scene.
Cities.
It's now you can get all these different experiences right at your doorstep, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we're working on. So we're basically, once we have the data from this campaign, we're going to walk some of those ideas out to figure out some really cool ways to reach women in person and not just digitally, which is great too. That'll be wonderful. But I love connecting in person with women.
So that's maybe coming sometime in 2018 or something like that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's what we're hoping for.
And so if people want to get information about your clothes, where can they find them online? There's a place, right?
Yes. So we got a website, reidmillerapparel.com. And you can find a bit of information about the campaign as well that we're working on, launching at the end of the month. And then we've got our beautiful riding denim for sale up there. And you can check out a bunch of photos of the riding jacket.
Awesome. Okay.
And see what that's going to look like.
And if you have your actual link, it'll take me a couple weeks to get this produced and out to you. Sure. But if you have that link for the GoFundMe campaign, I'll put it in the show notes too, so people can go to it directly.
Yeah. So can I add that because we won't have the link ready for people to go to until September 26th, till the launch. Can I add that at that point? Like,
sure.
Or do you want me to send it?
Sure. I'll see if I can figure out how to do that.
I'll have the website. So I'll have the website up and running ahead. I'll have to think of the way that they do it to let people access it, because I'll have people coming and providing feedback in the week before. So I certainly have a link. So maybe I can just try and send
no problem.
Then.
Obviously, it'll be on your website, reidmillerapparel.com, right?
Yeah.
So they can find you there. Any other handles or social media stuff you want to hand out before we get out of here?
Yeah.
People want to get in touch or fund you or
Right. So we have Instagram. We're very active on Instagram at Reid Miller Apparel.
Okay.
We've got a Facebook page, Reid Miller Apparel, and we're going to be operating under the hashtag Unlimited by Design.
Oh, I like it. Okay, cool. All right, all those will go in the show notes for sure then.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, Reid, it's been great talking to you today. Time to get out of here, but I'm looking forward to this release here September 26th, and good luck with it all.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Talk to everybody next time. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at jimjimsreinventionrevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of.